Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast.
Hey, everybody, Mark and Steve on the PBSC podcast. This is episode 180. How do I move from the symptoms of addiction to a real and lasting change of brain and heart? And this comes in response to a PBS listener's question and situation that they sent in to us. I'm just going to read that real quick, and then we're going to jump into this. It says, hello, I'm a recovering porn addict, and I've been listening to your podcast for the past 6 months. I have had a CSAT for the past 9 months and started going to 12-step meetings around the same time. So this guy's been in recovery for a fair while, taking it serious. The recovery process has been hard, but I've begun to finally uncover some of the needs that I've been trying to meet or ignore by using porn. It's been in some ways exciting to have a better understanding of my insecurities, which I have unknowingly been trying to shore up with porn. But now that I've started to pull back the curtain, I'm not sure of the best way to move forward. How can I practically retrain myself to address my insecurities in a healthy way now that those insecurities have been at least partly revealed? Just the knowledge of how my coping mechanisms are unhealthy and an idea of what a healthy response would be doesn't actually change my heart or my brain. I can tell myself truths repeatedly and can set up daily reminders of what would be healthy, but that does not seem to offer much in the way of real heart change. I know this question is very broad and answers may be insecurity or situation specific, but if there are any recommendations for how to really internalize healthy responses, I would appreciate it. Don't expect a quick, easy method of recovery. But if you feel there's a podcast already that answers the question, let me know. I'll give it a listen. Thanks for what you do. So actually, we really like this question. Really coherent, intelligent. It's obvious that this guy's been doing his work and realizing that he's getting beyond the symptoms of addiction down to the deeper core issues. And he's really asking, how do I make this stick? How do I internalize and really change myself in my heart and my brain so that I can move forward to have a really healthy life? So, we wanted to take a crack at this and talk about some important issues that go along with this one.
Yeah, most definitely. It, we like you said, I'm definitely salute this gentleman because he's already in a place where he's got some good mindfulness, some good awareness, and recognizing, hey, I've seen these symptoms, right, and I've started to address them. But as I've been doing that, right, I like how he says, as I've started to kind of pull back that curtain, it's sort of like, the stuff that I'm seeing underneath is scary. It's intimidating, and obviously I can, just change my behaviors. But how do I change the mindset?
Mm-hmm.
And it is an enlightened perspective because I think most of us, we tend to, and he probably this gentleman may have as well, but in our world, there is a real pattern when we're dealing with any kind of addiction. The same holds true in chemical addiction in society. There tends to always be a focus more on the symptomology component, right? And I think that there are probably a few reasons for that. I mean, on a societal level, and more of an individual level too. I guess that most of the consequences, right, the follow that comes from addiction, the cost to a family, financially, emotionally, the cost to a marriage, the cost to children, the cost to all those things are quantifiable, right? They're easier, I guess you could say, to measure. They're visible, right? Those are the things it's easy for, the typical person who's not involved in the trenches with these issues, so to speak, to see those things and say, yeah, we need to change those, right? Because those are what are hindering people or hurting people or whatever. And it's true. There is a lot of validity to that, but as we talk about on this podcast all the time, we would absolutely agree with this gentleman. You have to work on symptom management first. That is a huge component of recovery, but you can't end there because, symptomology, honestly, I would say, and Mark and I, we've learned this from experience as guys in recovery. Long term, staying in just symptom management is honestly exhausting. It's kind of like, I would actually argue in a sardonic way, it's kind of the worst of both worlds because it's like, geez, I'm not acting out. I don't get whatever quote unquote benefits I used to get from that, but I'm also not emotionally really feeling better either, right? I'm
Yeah.
feeling better in some ways. I'm not experiencing a lot of the consequences of the addiction, but I'm not escaping anymore. I don't have any way to cope, right? And so it's really not sustainable to stay in that place long term.
Well, and what happens if you get stuck in the treating symptoms place, which, like you said, Steve, is super important to get. We got to get some sobriety before we can work on the deeper issues.
Sure.
But if that's what it's all about, it's kind of like, okay, let's get this immediate destruction out of the way, and then I'll be good to go. And the great challenge with that is you get down the road when you get some good solid sobriety and you're not, quote, good to go. And I remember what a shock this was for me because I thought, you know what, as soon as I get this pornography and sex addiction stuff out of the way, my life's going to be clear sailing, man. And lo and
Yeah.
behold, as soon as I got really solid sobriety, there was actually a time when I got pretty angry and resentful. It's like, okay, hold on a minute. You recovery people are full of crap because I've been sober for a good long while and actually things have gotten worse. So you're like,
Yes.
okay, wait just a second. And the reason, things, quote, seem to get worse is because for the first time in my life, instead of running and escaping and avoiding and self-soothing and medicating every time life got hard, I started actually for the first time facing life on life's terms. And that meant instead of turning to my old outlets in addiction, I was actually having to learn strategies to actually face real life. And that
Yeah.
is damn hard, not just at first, but for a long while. And in some ways, it's still hard now because I don't run or escape or avoid. I actually stand up and kind of hit life head on, eyeball to eyeball. And that takes some real effort and skills and humility and a support system and all kinds of stuff. And so it's no easy thing, but it's essential to move from this treating symptomology to the ongoing process of getting to the core causes and the continual addressing and healing of those. Otherwise, you and Steve, what do you and I know? I can get sober from one thing, but if I don't get past the symptoms to the core causes, guess what's going to happen? I'm just going to replace that one thing with another addiction or another compulsion or another way to escape or cope.
For sure. Well, and you put it this way before the podcast, right? I like the word you used, although it is kind of doomy, but it's true, right? There's that inevitability of relapse with addiction,
Mm,
right? If we don't handle the underlying issues, the unfortunate reality for those, depending on the depth of addiction you're talking about across the board, you're looking at a question of, it's not if I'm going to relapse, it's a question of when, right? Because the long term, again, just the symptom management one is exhausting, but it's easy to become burned out, to get complacent, to get disillusioned, right? If we don't make that shift to that lifestyle change, if we aren't able to move over out of just getting, as some 12-step literature says, until we make that shift of, running joyously towards heaven rather than backing away from our personal hell,
Mm.
Sooner or later, it is no longer sustainable. And so, moving to this other way of looking at it is absolutely critical. And, it's a well-timed question right now on our Dare to Connect program for addict spouses and couples. We have monthly topics, and this month is codependency. So
Yeah, this
we're
is right in the heart of what this guy asked, because he said he's pulled back the curtain to try to get to his deeper issues and not just treat the symptoms. And what is he saying here that he discovered? All the insecurities that I used my porn and sex addiction to cope with and to cover over or self-medicate or whatever. I'm realizing I have all these insecurities. I was looking to the external to take care of my internal.
absolutely, absolutely right. There's very much that dynamic happening here, and codependency in all of its forms, and addiction is a form of codependency, one of definitely probably the purest forms. Is all about this idea of consistently trying to meet internal needs, like you said, Mark, with those external external methodology, whether it's validation or being wanted or you know trying to control the environment around us, right? There's so many ways in which codependency and the other elements tied to that show up, and breaking out of addiction in the long term really does mean, kind of like going to his question, right? Breaking out of this and addressing your insecurities means developing out those skill sets of being able to cultivate those internally. He talks in here about, I'm not sure what the best way to move forward. How do I address my insecurities? He talks about, deficits with, being loved and et cetera. And that's what we do as we break free of codependency, right? As we're working on this process of how do I begin to cultivate those things internally? And so, if for those of you who have not yet tried the Dare to Connect program, we invite you to come over, give it a current. We have an offer for a 2-week free trial going on. We'd love to have you come join us. It's about as great of a month as any to join in. We're having a really cool discussion this month. It may even carry over into next month. We've got a lot tied to this topic, but if we were to kind of shift into that region of how to cultivate this internally, right? And how do I start to do that? One of the things that we're talking about on Dare to Connect, and I think it'd be good to talk about for just a minute here is how do I start to meet those needs, right? Via myself and with other means, on the internal spectrum. How do I start to create that, and I guess you could say generate that right inside of myself, whether it's motivation, whether it's meeting those needs, et cetera. So I think that would be a good place to
Yeah,
start.
yeah. It gets to this concept of, in fact, today on D2C, Steve, you and I did a role play where I took myself back to my deep addiction years when I was just filled with insecurities. And I kept looking to my partner, to my wife, to make me feel okay, to make me feel whole, to make me
Mm,
complete. And when she couldn't deliver, which a spouse or partner can't, right? My codependency really created some massive issues, right? So if she was having a bad day, guess who else was having a bad day?
mm,
Mark.
yeah,
If she's not feeling like she's enough, then I'm not enough. Or if she didn't give the right amount of affirmation or the right amount of appreciation or give me the right kind of look, then suddenly I would feel horribly inadequate and disrespected, or whatever it was, and then I would go running to go fill all of those holes, to heal those fractures through all my outside addiction sources. And so this concept of how can I be enough, how can I be whole and complete regardless of what the people or circumstances around me are doing or not doing. Right? You want us to talk about how to get out of just the symptoms of addiction and treating those, to how do I heal my heart and my brain? How do I make this a change of heart, a change of brain? You do it by starting to practice and internalize and implement these situations where I would normally escape or self-soothe. How do I start to practice being enough, being whole, being complete, by using tools and strategies within myself as opposed to looking to things on the outside to make me okay? Right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many tools for this, but another starting point for those listening, would be there's a real focus on, and we want to be clear when I mention spirituality, we're not talking religion per se,
No.
or religiosity, but spirituality, a person's internal spiritual framework from a clinical and psychological perspective is huge in the recovery process, be it from addiction or codependency in general. Addiction is by definition a form of codependency. And here's why. The more of a defined spiritual framework that I have, and the more I've explored that, I fleshed that out, the more of a relationship I cultivate with a higher power, with the universe, with God, with whatever that is for me. Part of that exploration is either is I guess you could say eliciting or bringing forth what's my identity, right?
Mm,
What is my value to the universe, to my higher power? Where do I fit in, right? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Questions like that and the answers tied to those things all help to give us identity. And identity helps to contribute to worth, right?
yeah.
And so because as addicts, we run around so often emotionally in this codependent state, looking to, and this gentleman who wrote in is a great describer of this, right? We were using all these external things to try to fill these deficits, right? And we do it with addiction. Sometimes we become emotional chameleons, we call it that, right? We're looking for all these things to make us happy, or sometimes we're looking to other people and we try to chameleonize ourselves with them, right? Say or do or be the right person, so we can get that validation, get that love, get that standing or that place in the world from those things. And when we start to explore things like what you said, Mark, when we start to develop out certain skill sets and we pair that with things like the spiritual framework, that's how we start to figure out who am I, and in turn we turn less and less to everyone else telling us who to be or
Right.
how to be or that we're enough, right? Or whatever the case may be. So this is one of the reasons why this is such a big topic in D2C for the month and why I may go over, because as you can see, we could never cover this in a podcast
Yeah,
in an
yeah,
extended way.
it's probably going to be, yeah, that's why it might be months
But it does
to
give some
talk
good
about.
starting points, right?
Yeah, it is good.
It's a good
Yeah.
starting point. So
So as I start to, look to this, spiritual foundation and connection, which again, not religiosity, spirituality. I have clients who are atheists
yes.
who seek spirituality. Where do they find it? They find it in nature. They find it in their support groups. They find it in lots of places. What it means is that I have identity and meaning, and I matter because of all of this higher stuff. And so I'm not dependent on whether that person affirmed me or not just then. I'm not
I have
dependent on
yeah.
whether they raised their eyebrow and looked disappointed or didn't just then. Right? I have
Mm,
I have higher meaning that I tap into independent of what everyone else is or isn't doing. Right?
yeah.
Such an important part of this.
My internal traits, right? My internal characteristics, my uniqueness, right? These are all things that give me value, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to these other things. And the more we're able to fill those voids, right, with identity, with understanding, with purpose, with, those definitions, and we start again to pair because there is an element too of this, and Mark was kind of alluding to this before, but there's a fake it till you make it element, right? So much of codependency is this fear around rejection, right? And so as we start to implement a whole variety of healthy skills, we go into detail in our Dare to Connect program and in our clinics about those. The more we start to develop those out and become adept at them, the more we also quell that internal fear of rejection, because we start to see that, the more I find value again internally, what happens to the fear that I have about others rejecting me goes way, 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 way down, right? And so I become increasingly less codependent on those things as I become more emotionally independent and grounded in, again, who I am, right? My uniqueness, my inherent traits giving me worth, as opposed to looking to external authorities to say, hey, you're enough, right? Hey,
Yeah,
you're this, hey, you're
we
that.
sometimes say I have my own internal weather system, regardless of what the weather's like outside of me,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes,
That I can call upon. Yeah, I love that. You know,
absolutely.
yeah. So, we can start to ask. So, how do I move from this total focus on sobriety, on treating symptoms, on just getting these destructive behaviors out of my life, and then I'll be set to go. How do I move from that to really feeling like I'm evolving inside? I'm transforming. My brain and my heart are changing. One of the useful things, Steve, you and I see, how many times have we heard from somebody? Here's a question they ask: how long am I going to have to keep up this recovery stuff? Right? Or sometimes they'll make a really sort of angry statement. I don't think I can do this for the rest of, if I got to do recovery for the rest of my life, right?
Forget it.
I don't think I want to do this.
Yep.
And it's
Absolutely.
really interesting because, I've talked on PBS here before, where I had a lot of resentment and anger about that myself. And I remember saying to one of my early mentors, I said, man, I just want to be normal. When do I get to live like one of those normal guys where I don't have to do this recovery crap anymore? And I
Mm-hmm.
remember he looked at me and he said, Mark, he said, will you take me through for a minute the different tools and skills and strategies, self-care and communication skills, and how you've learned how to connect and be vulnerable and be authentic? Will you take me through all of the things that you're learning to do? Tell me which of those that you would like to just eliminate and never live again for the rest of your life. Which ones? And it was kind of this, take me down the list of what you're doing in so-called recovery and tell me which one of those that you don't want to live going forward in your life. And as I went through the exercise, I looked at all the stuff that I was doing in quote recovery, and I was like, wow, you know what? I think I really want to keep living all this stuff and getting all the benefits for as long as I'm here on the planet, I think. And he looked at me and says, exactly. And he said, maybe you need a little change of vocabulary. He says, instead of this pounding on recovery, how long am I going to have to do recovery? He said, how about you just start thinking in terms of how long do I want to keep engaging in healthy living and healthy relationships? How long
Mm-hmm.
do I want to keep
Yeah.
enjoying connection with self and connection with others? How long do I want to keep practicing being authentic and speaking my truth and standing my ground? When you put it that way, now it's like, you know what? I think I'm in this for the long haul,
Yeah.
right? And that's how you internalize and start to experience a change of heart and a change of brain. I'm still experiencing changes in my heart today. My brain is still rewiring, right? I haven't arrived with all of this stuff. And quite frankly, this might sound weird to people listening. I hope I never arrive. I hope that when I finally take my last breath and step off this planet, I hope my heart and my brain are still changing in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think a big thing as we kind of wrap up here is if we kind of shift to an assignment and a starting place, right? We've given a lot of pointers about spiritual framework and trying these things. A great starting point for this gentleman who wrote in, and for anybody listening also, would be where the rubber meets the road would be sitting down. I do this exercise. We did this in Dare to Connect just the other day. I do this in my clinic, but it would be sitting down and asking yourself, make a list. Besides the orgasm, what does sexual release do for me? Right? What's the emotional, mental, spiritual payoff or payoffs from that? Right? What do I gain from that? What have I historically gained from that? What do I glean from it? And are there healthier, more sustain? And then the next step is to look at, what ways might I gain some of those same benefits, right? In healthy, sustainable ways that don't involve relying on other people to cultivate that emotional confirmation for me, right? Whatever those things are.
Yeah, other outlets, right? Yeah, I
Yes.
like what you said, Steve. What is, if pornography is my main challenge, what does pornography give me? What
You
needs does it meet? How am I going to that place to try to feel whole or feel okay or cope?
wanted, loved, desired,
Yeah.
all those
So
things.
what does it give? We often just say, oh, it's all entirely bad and horrible and awful. There's no benefit to it whatsoever. Well, if that was true, then those listening here and Steve and I, we wouldn't be in recovery because
Yeah.
those outlets would offer us nothing. Obviously, they have offered something. And it's important to say, okay, what benefits have I been getting from these addiction outlets? What
Yeah.
needs have they been meeting? And if I can identify what those are, then I can start to ask, what other ways can I meet those same needs or get those same benefits?
In ways that are sustainable and don't destroy my life.
And don't destroy my life or my
in,
relationships.
in
Yeah.
simple terms. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so that's a great starting point, guys. Well, I know we got to wrap up here. As always, we hope that you will continue listening. We so appreciate your patronage and listens and downloads. We continue to grow in our popularity. I think Mark mentioned we're now in 180 countries, I think.
Yeah,
I think
right there.
there's like 190 something in the world, and some of those I'd assume probably change hands fairly frequently, some of the teenier ones. So,
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but we love the fact that that so many of you are finding help. If you like what you hear here, as always, you will love the Dare to Connect program. If you are struggling to find sobriety, if your spouse is struggling with betrayal trauma, if you've been doing recovery for years and are looking for a way to level it up to change the playing field, may we humbly suggest the Dare to Connect program. It's not like anything you've ever tried before. It's accessible anytime, anywhere, 24 hours a day through an app, through your online account. You have access to over 25 hours of content every month, both in a live format as well as in a pre-recorded format. We tackle monthly topics. You can ask questions anytime and get answers. We have live interactive chat, 12-step support sessions on the weekend for addicts and spouses, session every week for addict spouses and couples, individualized recovery work assignments with virtually every single session that we do. That's a lot of that's just the stuff coming off the top of my head. There's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. It's kind of a
and
one-stop shop.
and so we hope you'll give it a shot. For the cost of a couple of therapy sessions a month, we can take you to new different places. And whether you're just starting this journey and you're in that terrified, scared place, or whether you've been doing this for 5 years, Dare to Connect can take you to the next place.
Yeah.
So we hope that you'll give us a try. You can check that out at Dare to Connect Now, daretoconnectnow.com. And that's daretoconnectnow.com. And as always, if there's a topic you'd like us to tackle as much as we can in a short time on the podcast, you're always welcome to reach out to us at pbscpodcast.com. That's pbscpodcast.com. And there's a contact form down at the bottom you can send those questions to, and we'll endeavor to address those.
Sounds good. All right, everybody. Thanks for being with us here on this episode. And as always, we'll look forward to spending time with you next time we get back together.
Sounds great. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye. Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.